Hi, I'm Jilly G. Welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to show you my cornflake chicken, Brussels sprouts, and mashed potatoes and gravy. It's really a simple dinner to put together. This was one of my favorite dinners growing up. Although the cornflakes are different than the cornflakes I had as a kid, but the cornflakes that I have are not all corn. I'll put a link below for this cereal. But it's a really nice way to have kind of an oven fried chicken, and the cornflakes give it a really nice crunch. So first thing I'm going to do is preheat my oven. And we're going to go about 400. And then I'm going to get my Brussels sprouts ready, which I've already gotten them mostly ready. I've cut them in half or in quarters depending on how big your Brussels sprouts are. And this is also one of my favorite ways to have Brussels sprouts. And I've got about a quarter cup of olive oil. And I'm just going to toss my Brussels sprouts in this olive oil. And then I spread them out in an even layer. This was about, one big bunch at the grocery store. I'm not sure, maybe a pound. I'm not sure how much Brussels sprouts weigh. But it was one big package. And then I've got some salt and pepper, however much you like. Just kind of mix them together a little bit here, and then just sprinkle on to your Brussels sprouts. So my Brussels sprouts will go in the oven not quite at the same time as the chicken. The chicken will take a little bit longer to cook. So once we get the chicken done, I'll put that in the oven probably for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then I'll put in my Brussels sprouts. And then in this pot, I've got about 5 potatoes already peeled and cut up, and they're just soaking in water with some salt. And then I'm going to show you a really fast, easy gravy. When you want gravy to go on your potatoes, but you don't have any pan drippings from your chicken. So I've got 2 cups of chicken stock, and then I've got, about a tablespoon of cornstarch. And we'll mix this with some of the chicken stock to make a slurry, and then we'll bring this up to a boil. I'll get to that when it's time for gravy. And then I've got 4 chicken breasts and 4 chicken thighs. Probably about 3/4 of a cup of my gluten-free flour, a couple of eggs, and then my spice mixture here. And I didn't really measure it. For this recipe, I always just kind of eyeball my spices. But I'll give you kind of the rough estimate. I've got about a tablespoon of smoked paprika, about 2 teaspoons of oregano, about a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, about 1/8 of a teaspoon or so of cayenne pepper, about a 1/2 teaspoon or so of garlic powder. And I don't have any onion powder, so I've got some onion flakes in here, which they might have some trouble sticking to everything, but we'll see if it gives it some flavor. And then I've got about a tablespoon of seasoned salt. And it's actually a smoked seasoned salt. It's really good. I'll try to find a link and put that below for that spice as well. So that's all ready. Everything else is ready. The first thing I'm going to do is start crunching up my cornflake crumbs. And they're just in the package from the box. You could put these in a food processor, whatever you have. But I usually open them just a little bit. If you do this and you pop the bag, they'll go everywhere. I've got my rolling pin here. Let me give myself some room. And I'm holding the hole that I made kind of closed. Maybe you've had a bad day at work. Make sure to get a cereal that is not sugar-coated or flavored. Nowadays cereals have so many different flavors, but this is just a basic cornflake-ish flavor. And I did a pretty good job at keeping that hole closed. Not a lot made it out of the bag. Whenever you're breading something like chicken or fish or something like that, it's always best to have your assembly line ready. I'll start here and move along, and then my cookie sheet is ready. And it's just lined with foil for easy cleanup. Once you get started, your hands get so messy, it's kind of challenging to stop in the middle, wash your hands, and do something else. So it's easy to have everything ready, and then you're ready. So I'm going to pour my spices in to my flour and just stir it around into my flour. You could do this with whatever spice mixture you like. And then with my same fork, I'm going to mix up my 2 eggs. And I always start out with 2 eggs and see what we've got. If you need to add a little bit of water or milk, you can. But we'll see. I may or may not need another egg. So as with anything breaded, and especially chicken, you don't want to touch anything, and you want to wash your hands well. I just dip it in my flour and spice mixture here, evenly coated. These are really big pieces of chicken. Into the egg mixture, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Let any excess drip off into our cornflake mixture. Make a big mess. And if you crunch up your crumbs a little bit smaller, you'll get a little bit more even coverage. But this is fine. You could use tongs, but hands are always the easiest when you're doing stuff like this. And now my oven's ready. And it looks like I'm going to need probably 1 more egg. Get another egg if you need to. And then just keep going with your chicken thighs. And you don't have to do as much as I'm doing. This is a lot of chicken. And this recipe is just easily halved. You would just use half a package of the cereal, and then however many eggs you need, and whatever pieces of chicken you're gonna do. And I never really hear of this. Growing up, it was a regular meal in my house. But I don't ever hear anybody talk about it. I never see anybody make this recipe. And I watch a lot of cooking shows. If this is something you grew up with, or you still make, or you had as a kid, or maybe you hated it. Maybe you didn't like it at all. And just by changing your spices in your flour mixture, you can change this to be whatever flavor you like. If you're trying to watch your diet and maybe you don't want deep fried chicken, which I won't complain, fried chicken is always good. Maybe that will be a recipe coming soon. But this is a really nice way to change up an everyday chicken dinner. And they all fit. I'm going to clean up and then I'll show you the rest. Usually when you're doing something like this, you don't want to necessarily crowd the pan. And they're not super squished together, but they're pretty close together. And even though some of my chicken pieces are pretty big, they're actually kind of thin. So I'm going to put this in for probably about 20 minutes, and then I'll put in my Brussels sprouts. And while my chicken is in the oven, it's probably got, about 10 more minutes before I put in my Brussels sprouts. And with my chicken stock, I'm just going to add a little bit to my cornstarch and make a slurry. We're not ready for this yet, but while you're waiting for your chicken and other things, I just get this ready. You could add water or even milk to this, which I may or may not add a little bit of milk to the gravy when it's almost finished. So that's ready. And I'm going to pour my chicken stock into my saucepan. And then this will kind of settle before we're ready for it. But just set this aside as well. So I'm going to turn my potatoes on, about high, get those boiling and cooked. And everything is ready to go. We just wait for the chicken. I just put my Brussels sprouts in the oven, as you saw. And my potatoes are coming up to a boil. And periodically, in that 20 minutes, probably in about 10 minutes, I'm going to stir my Brussels sprouts. And then, of course, it may or may not go longer than 20 minutes until your chicken is done and the Brussels sprouts are as done as you'd like them to be. But while I'm waiting for my potatoes, I've got some butter cut up. And I've mentioned before in one of my other videos, how I like mashed potatoes is I always add in some mayonnaise. And you could add in sour cream, or you don't even have to do that at all. But that's how I like my mashed potatoes. So that's ready, some extra salt and pepper. And once I get the potatoes all mashed and ready to go, I'll start on my gravy. Once you stir your Brussels sprouts, make sure they're in an even layer. If you could smell my chicken, sure smells good. You'll notice your Brussels sprouts will get kind of crispy. You could stop when they're bright green if you want to, but I actually like them when they get crispy around the edges and on the kind of the flat side of where they're getting cooked. You can cook your Brussels sprouts for however long you like, when they're done to your preferred doneness. I just like it when they get really crispy. And my chicken is looking really good. And I always use my potato masher to lift up my potatoes and see how done they are. And my potatoes are done, and I've got my chicken stock coming up to a boil. And I've got about not quite a half a cup of butter here. And you don't have to cut it up. But I do, just so it melts faster. Salt and pepper. And probably about a half a cup of mayonnaise. And the heat is off on my potatoes, but I've got the lid on just to keep them warm. And my chicken stock is up to a boil. And this is just over medium heat. And I've got my chicken stock and cornstarch slurry here. I'm just going to mix it together and pour this in. And just stir this constantly, for about a minute or so. And depending on the chicken stock that you use, sometimes they have a lot of salt. So I usually wait until I've got it as thick as I want it, and then I'll add in maybe a little bit of milk, and then I'll decide about salt and pepper. I'm going to give it a taste. Salt and pepper, however much you like. And you can add in milk or heavy cream. I'm going to turn my gravy down to low and occasionally stir that. I'm going to check on my Brussels sprouts and my chicken. Getting nice and crispy. Just how I like them. And my chicken is looking really good. I'm just going to cut into one of the pieces here just to make sure it's done on the inside. And that one is looking really good. And so is that one. Get yourself a plate. So get yourself some Brussels sprouts. And I know they're not the most appetizing color. They always look better when they're bright green, but I really like them when they're crispy like this. And then get yourself a piece of chicken. I don't think a fork is the best way to do that. And I hate to admit it, but I'm gonna. I think I went a little too thin on my gravy. I think it's just a little bit too thin. But you know, gravy always thickens up as it cools off. I'm gonna give myself some room here. If you make my gluten-free biscuits, those would be perfect with this dinner and this gravy. It's not a fancy gravy at all. It's just chicken stock and some thickening and salt and pepper. You could even add in some spice mixture that you had for your chicken, whatever you want to do. But let's cut into this and see what our chicken looks like. Nice and juicy. Looks really good. Make sure to get some of your cornflake coating in there. And it's really hot. It's really good. Some of our mashed potatoes and really runny gravy. And some of my soft and crispy Brussels sprouts. A perfect dinner. Of course, if you like chicken and Brussels sprouts and mashed potatoes and gravy, but really good. Again, if you had crunched up your cornflakes a little bit finer than what I did, it would be a little bit more of an even coat, but I like it like this, where it's kind of chunky and pretty crunchy. Sometimes with gluten-free things like this, if you crumble them up too fine and then you use them as a breading, they almost become a little bit gluey. So I always tend to go a little bit chunkier just so they stay crispy. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you on the next one.